At 8:30 in the morning on July 14th, a number came out of Washington that made gold jump $90 in under 60 seconds. Silver moved even faster. And 90 minutes later, one man stood up in front of Congress and said something that should have calmed the markets down. It didn't, because underneath that number, something else was happening. Something in the physical silver market that has nothing to do with Congress, nothing to do with interest rates, and everything to do with the fact that the world may be quietly running out of a metal it cannot live without. Stick with me, because by the end of this, you're going to understand why silver has become the most confusing asset in the world right now, and why the date July 14th might matter a lot more in 6 months than it does today. If you're interested in money, investing, gold, silver, and protecting your financial future, go ahead and subscribe to Money Insights and like this video, because every week we break down the biggest financial stories in simple English. Now let's get into it. Here's what we're going to uncover: why the price of silver has been swinging wildly enough to give experienced traders whiplash, why one man, Fed Chair Kevin Warsh, has more influence over your savings right now than almost anyone else in the country, why July 14th became a battleground between two completely different economic stories fighting for control of the same afternoon, and why, underneath all of that noise, there's a quiet supply problem in silver that most people watching the news have never even heard of. None of this is simple, but by the end, it will make sense. Let's start with a number that should stop you in your tracks. Back in January of 2026, silver hit an all-time high of 121.64 an ounce. Gold hit its own record too, north of 5,589. People were calling it the trade of the decade. Retirees, truck drivers, small business owners, regular people who'd never bought a metal bar in their life were suddenly lining up at coin shops. Then, on January 30th, 2026, in a single afternoon, it all came apart. President Trump announced his pick to lead the Federal Reserve, a man named Kevin Warsh. Within hours, silver didn't just dip, it cratered, falling more than 30% in one trading day, one of the most violent single-day collapses for the metal in over 40 years. Gold dropped hard too, shedding close to $900 an ounce. Think about that for a second. Imagine checking your retirement account and watching a third of it disappear before lunch. Not because of a war, not because of a crash on Wall Street, but because of who got nominated to a job. That's the kind of power we're talking about. Picture a retired school teacher in Ohio who spent years buying silver coins a little at a time, the same way some people buy savings bonds. She wasn't trying to get rich. She just wanted a cushion that didn't depend on the stock market or the dollar staying strong forever. On January 30th, she watched a chunk of that cushion evaporate in an afternoon because of a name she'd never heard before that morning. That's not a hypothetical scenario. That's the kind of ordinary saver who actually got caught in this all at once, almost overnight. So who is this man? Kevin Warsh isn't some obscure economist. Harvard Law, a public policy background from Stanford. He worked in mergers and acquisitions at Morgan Stanley before joining the White House's National Economic Council. At just 35 years old, he became the youngest person ever appointed to the Federal Reserve's Board of Governors, and he was in the room for one of the most dangerous moments in modern financial history, the 2008 crisis. He's also, by most accounts, about to become the wealthiest Fed chair in history, with a portfolio that includes stakes in companies like SpaceX and reported personal wealth well over $100 million. He's also connected to one of America's most famous business families by marriage. None of that tells you how he'll vote on interest rates, but it does tell you this isn't a career bureaucrat quietly filling a seat. This is someone who has spent decades around the exact kind of money and power that decides what a dollar or an ounce of silver is actually worth. But here's where everything changes. Warsh built his entire reputation on one idea. Inflation is not something that just happens to an economy. It's a choice. And if the Fed lets the money supply grow too fast for too long, prices spiral, and the only way out is pain. Higher rates, a shrinking balance sheet, discipline, even when it hurts. That philosophy is precisely why silver crashed the day he was nominated. Wall Street heard inflation hawk and immediately priced in a stronger dollar, tighter money, and less need for a metal that thrives when people are scared about the value of their cash. But here's the twist almost nobody talks about. Gold and silver didn't stay down. Within weeks, both metals started clawing back. Why would that happen if the market had just decided Warsh was going to strangle inflation out of the system? Because the market started to realize something uncomfortable. Or the Fed can raise interest rates. The Fed can shrink its balance sheet. But the Fed cannot print more oil. It cannot print more silver. It cannot manufacture more food. Warsh could fight the money side of inflation all he wanted, but there's a physical side to prices that no chairman, no matter how hawkish, can control with a vote. That single realization is the reason this story doesn't end where you'd expect. Think of it this way. Imagine a landlord who suddenly announces the rent is going up hard, starting next month to fight what he calls years of irresponsible spending by tenants. People panic. Some move out immediately, assuming everything is about to get more expensive across the board. But then a few tenants start noticing something. The landlord can raise the rent all he wants. He can't stop the price of groceries from climbing or gas from creeping up at the pump down the street. The rent hike controls one lever. It doesn't control the whole building's cost of living. That's roughly the gap the market rediscovered in the weeks after Warsh's nomination, the gap between what a Fed chair can control and what he can't. Now fast forward to June. Warsh held his first meeting as Fed chair. The committee voted unanimously to hold interest rates steady, somewhere between 3.50 and 3.75%. Sounds calm, right? Unanimous, stable. It wasn't. Behind the scenes, the committee was reportedly deeply split on what comes next. Some members pushing for more hikes to keep crushing inflation, others worried that going too far would tip the economy into a recession. A committee that looks unified in public and is fractured in private is exactly the kind of thing that makes markets nervous. Because if the people steering the ship don't agree on the destination, nobody else can plan around it either. And all of that tension was building toward one single day, July 14th. Here's why that date became the center of everything. Two enormous events were scheduled to collide within 90 minutes of each other. At 8:30 in the morning, the Bureau of Labor Statistics released the June inflation report, the Consumer Price Index. And at 10 a.m., Kevin Warsh himself sat down in front of the House Financial Services Committee to testify in person about where he thinks the economy is heading. Imagine being a trader that morning. You don't know what the inflation number will say. You don't know what tone the Fed chair will strike 90 minutes later, and your entire portfolio is riding on both. Now imagine you're not a trader at all. You're a small business owner who buys silver as a hedge for your company's savings, or a young professional who put part of a bonus into a gold ETF last year because everyone online said it was safe. You're not staring at 6 screens. You're checking your phone between meetings, watching a number swing by thousands of dollars in the time it takes to refill your coffee. That's the emotional reality behind every one of these headlines. It's not abstract to the people living through it. At first, that sounds like a normal economic day to day. But here's where history tells a different story. Just weeks earlier, oil prices had been climbing because of renewed fighting between the U.S. and Iran, with tanker traffic through the Strait of Hormuz, one of the most important oil choke points on Earth, under threat again. Higher oil usually means higher inflation. Everyone expected June's number to reflect that pressure. Instead, the CPI report showed something almost nobody predicted. Prices actually fell 0.4% for the month, the sharpest monthly drop in over 5 years. The annual inflation rate slid from 4.2% down to 3.5%. Gasoline prices had collapsed nearly 10% after a brief ceasefire temporarily reopened that same strait everyone had been worried about. Gold jumped $90 in minutes. Silver spiked more than 3% in the same window. Here's the part most people completely miss. A weaker inflation number is usually great news for gold and silver because it means the Fed has less reason to keep interest rates high. And high interest rates are one of the biggest headwinds precious metals face. Lower rates mean less reward for parking your money in a savings account, which makes a shiny metal that pays you nothing suddenly a lot more attractive by comparison. Here's a simple way to picture that mechanism. Imagine 2 neighbors. One keeps his savings in a bank account earning a solid interest rate. The other keeps hers in a safe in the form of gold bars, earning nothing at all. When interest rates are high, the neighbor with the bank account looks smart. His money is working for him every single day. But when interest rates fall, that advantage shrinks. Suddenly, the neighbor with the gold isn't losing out on much of anything because there's barely any interest to miss. That's what traders mean when they talk about real yields. It's really just a fancy way of comparing those 2 neighbors. So the metals should have kept climbing after that number, right? Not exactly. And this is the contradiction sitting at the center of this whole story. 90 minutes after the number dropped, Kevin Warsh testified before Congress. And instead of celebrating the good inflation news, he did something that surprised a lot of people watching. He didn't soften his tone. He reminded lawmakers that the committee still has, in his words, essentially zero patience for inflation staying elevated for too long. The next day, testifying again in front of the Senate, he repeated almost the exact same message, nearly word for word. One good month of data wasn't enough to change his mind. That's the moment gold's rally started to lose steam, even with good news sitting right in front of everyone. Traders who had been pricing in roughly a 3 in 4 chance of a rate hike by September suddenly cut those odds down to somewhere closer to a coin flip. Still not zero, still a real possibility hanging over the market. Here's a small detail that changes everything about how you should read this whole event. A single month of falling prices doesn't erase a trend. And the trend that pushed that June number down, a temporary ceasefire easing oil prices, had already started reversing by the time Warsh was speaking. Oil was climbing again within days as tensions flared back up, which means the very thing that made June look so good could make July look a lot worse. So, which story wins? The one-month relief rally, or the hawkish chairman who refuses to declare victory? Nobody knows yet, and that uncertainty alone is enough to keep gold and silver swinging wildly for weeks. But none of that, not Warsh, not the CPI report, not the testimony, actually explains the strangest part of this whole story. And this is where we have to zoom out from the headlines and look at something almost nobody is covering. Silver itself may be running low. Here's the bigger picture almost nobody notices. For 6 years in a row now, the world has used more silver than it has mined. Not once, not as a one-time fluke. 6 consecutive years according to the Silver Institute's own research. In 2026 alone, the shortfall is projected to hit roughly 46 million ounces, even wider than the year before. Now, you might be thinking, if we're using more than we make, where has all the extra silver been coming from? From savings. Literally. Since 2021, the world has drained roughly 762 million ounces out of what's called above-ground stock. Silver sitting in vaults, bank storage, and dealer inventories that had been built up over decades. Think of it like a family slowly eating through a chest freezer full of food they stocked up on years ago without ever going back to the grocery store to restock. Eventually, that freezer runs empty. Picture it like a small town with only one gas station, and that gas station's underground tank hasn't been refilled properly in years. Most days, nobody notices. Cars still pull up, still fill their tanks, life goes on as normal, but everyone in that town is quietly relying on a tank that's been slowly draining for a long time. It doesn't take a disaster to expose the problem. It just takes one unusually busy weekend, one rush of demand nobody planned for, and suddenly the pumps run dry, even though nothing catastrophic actually happened. That's roughly the picture of the global silver market right now. And in October of 2025, we got a preview of what that looks like in real time. Vaults in London saw the amount of freely available, unencumbered silver fall to just 17%, a historic low. That triggered what analysts called a liquidity squeeze. Lease rates, essentially the interest rate to borrow physical silver for a short period, spiked dramatically. Metal that normally sat quietly in London vaults suddenly got shipped across the ocean into American vaults instead, chasing better prices and different demand. Here's the unexpected consequence of all of that. Why does any of this matter to a teacher in Ohio or a retiree in Florida who has never bought a silver coin in their life? Because silver isn't just a shiny investment anymore. It's an industrial metal that modern life quietly depends on. It's in the solar panels going up on rooftops across the country. It's in electric vehicles. It's in the semiconductors powering the AI boom you've probably heard about 100 times this year. Every one of those industries needs real physical silver. Not a chart, not a futures contract, actual metal, and none of them can simply substitute their way around a shortage overnight. So even while some parts of demand are cooling, jewelry sales have dropped and some solar manufacturers are using less silver per panel to save money, coin and bar buying by everyday investors is projected to jump 18% this year. People are pulling physical silver out of the system faster than industry can free it up. Think about how many things around you right now might contain a sliver of this metal without you ever thinking about it. The phone in your pocket, the solar panels on a neighbor's roof, the dashboard of an electric car parked down the street, the medical equipment in a hospital a few miles away. Silver isn't some niche commodity locked away in a vault somewhere far off. It's threaded quietly through the machinery of modern life in amounts too small to notice individually, but too essential to disappear. That's the psychological twist hiding underneath all the Fed drama. Even if Kevin Warsh manages to tame inflation perfectly, even if the Fed threads the needle exactly right, even if the economy avoids a recession entirely, the physical silver market still has this quiet structural pressure sitting underneath it, one that has nothing to do with interest rates at all. That's why some analysts have started watching a number called the gold to silver ratio. Basically, how many ounces of silver it takes to equal the price of 1 ounce of gold. Historically, that ratio drifts somewhere in the 60s or 70s during normal times. In the middle of July, it briefly touched 70 to 1, as gold held roughly steady while silver dipped. Some see that gap as a sign silver has room to catch up. Markets often react to ratios like this as a signal, though, as always, history rhymes, it doesn't repeat exactly, and nobody can promise which direction the gap will close. Here's a reality check, though. None of this guarantees prices go up. A structural deficit doesn't mean a shortage happens on any particular Tuesday. Industrial buyers can substitute materials over time. A recession could crush demand from electronics and solar all at once. Warsh could stay hawkish long enough that higher rates keep pressuring metals regardless of supply tightness. Some analysts, including major banks, have actually cut their short-term price forecasts for gold this year, even while keeping long-term targets far higher. The story is genuinely two-sided, and anyone who tells you they know exactly what happens next is selling you something. But here's the pattern that ties this whole thing together. Every time in history when a metal that ordinary life depends on has been drawn down for years in a row, while the people controlling interest rates were fighting an entirely separate battle over inflation, the two forces eventually collided. Sometimes that collision is quiet, sometimes it isn't. We saw a preview of Isn't back in January, the day Warsh got nominated. We saw another preview on July 14th, when a great inflation number and a stubborn Fed chair pulled the market in two directions inside the same morning. So why should an ordinary person watching this actually care? Because whether or not you own a single ounce of silver, this story is really about something bigger. It's about how fragile the connection is between the economy of headlines, interest rates, testimony, congressional hearings, and the economy of physical things, mines, vaults, solar panels, and circuit boards. Most of the time, those two economies move together quietly enough that nobody notices the seams, but every once in a while, like on July 14th, you can actually watch the seam crack open in real time in a single trading session. That's what makes this different from just another news cycle about the Fed. The Fed meets again on July 28th and 29th. Right behind that, one of the inflation measures the Fed actually watches most closely, a report called the PCE, comes out at the end of the month. Both of those dates sit downstream of everything we just walked through. A hawkish surprise could rattle metals again. A soft surprise could reignite the rally that stalled out after Warsh's testimony. Nobody can tell you with certainty which way it breaks. Not Warsh, not the analysts, not us. Think about the truck driver hauling freight across state lines, half listening to a financial podcast to pass the time. Or the young couple trying to decide whether to put part of their wedding fund savings into something other than a checking account. Or the small manufacturer who needs silver-plated components for the parts he builds, watching his input costs swing by double digits depending on what a Fed chair says in front of a congressional committee on a random Tuesday morning. None of these people work in finance. All of them are affected by this story, whether they realize it or not. But here's what you can walk away from this with. The reason silver feels so strange and unpredictable right now isn't because the market is broken, or because some hidden conspiracy is manipulating prices behind closed doors. It's because two enormous, slow-moving stories are finally colliding at the same time. A Fed chair fighting a very public battle over inflation and interest rates, and a physical metal quietly running short after 6 years of drawing down its reserves. That collision is not fear, it's not panic. It's simply what happens when the paper economy and the physical economy stop moving in sync for a while. Understanding that doesn't mean predicting exactly what silver does next week, or next month, or by the time the Fed meets again. It means you now understand why the swings have been so violent, why one congressional hearing can move a market that took decades to build, and why a date like July 14th, 2026 might end up being remembered as one small moment in a much longer story about a metal the modern world can't actually live without. Knowledge doesn't guarantee you'll get the timing right, but it beats making decisions out of fear or headlines or a single $90 move in gold before breakfast. If you learned something new today, make sure to subscribe to Money Insights and like this video. More powerful financial insights are coming next.